She killed their baby to hide her shame. But years later, God made her face the child again, through another boy. The morning sun rose gently over Lagos Island, painting the skyline gold. The Adams apartment buzzed with laughter, balloons, and music. Today was Jason's first birthday, a day that should have been filled with nothing but joy. Daniel Adams stood near the window, smiling proudly as he watched his wife, Martha, carry their baby boy. Jason's giggles melted his heart. He had worked hard for this moment, years of hustling, saving, and sacrificing, all for this little family. "Happy birthday, my champ," Daniel whispered, kissing Jason's forehead. The baby chuckled, tiny hands reaching for his father's beard. Martha smiled, her beauty glowing under the morning light, but behind her charming grin was something darker, a secret too heavy for her heart. Every time Daniel held Jason close, her pulse quickened. Each time he called the boy, "my son," guilt stabbed her like a knife. She forced another smile as guests arrived, family, neighbors, and church friends. The small living room filled with warmth and laughter, but for Martha, every laugh sounded like thunder. Every smile reminded her of a truth she had buried deep in her soul. Jason was not Daniel's child. During the celebration, Daniel's phone buzzed. He excused himself to the balcony to answer a business call. Martha quickly pulled out her own phone and saw a message flash across her screen. "I'm in Accra now." "You can't hide this forever, Martha and Linda." Her hand trembled. The glass of juice she was holding slipped and shattered on the floor. She quickly bent to clean it, her heart racing. "Why now?" she thought. "Why is Linda bringing this up again?" Daniel returned, noticing her shaking hands. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Yes, just nervous from the party rush," she lied with a forced smile. The party ended beautifully. Daniel danced with Jason in his arms, singing softly as Martha watched. For a moment, she almost believed everything was fine, that her lie could live forever. But later that night, when everyone was asleep, Martha sat alone in the dim light of their living room. She unlocked her phone and opened the message again. "You told me you'd confess before it got worse." "He deserves to know, Martha. Jason deserves truth." Martha bit her lip, tears falling silently. "No," she whispered. "I can't lose this life. I can't lose him." In the bedroom, Daniel stirred and called out, "Martha, come to bed." She quickly wiped her tears, locked her phone, and returned to him. As she lay beside Daniel, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, the guilt roared louder than the night traffic outside. She turned her head and looked at her husband's calm, trusting face. Daniel reached over, pulling her close. "You've made me the happiest man alive," he said sleepily. Martha's chest tightened. She swallowed hard, whispering back, "And you've made me the safest liar alive." Outside, Lagos glittered, a city alive with dreams, secrets, and stories untold. Inside the Adams home, the perfect family picture hung on the wall, but beneath its smiling frame hid the beginning of tragedy. And as the clock struck midnight, the sound of Martha's phone, vibrating again, broke the silence. Another message from Accra appeared, one that would begin the fall of everything she had built. "He will find out soon, Martha. The truth always wins." She turned the phone face down, heart pounding as the screen dimmed into darkness. The perfect lie had just begun to crack. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains of the Adamses' bedroom. The sound of distant horns and church bells mixed with the hum of Lagos life outside. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, buttoning his shirt for work. Martha, still wrapped in her nightgown, moved quietly, her eyes red from a night without sleep. Jason's soft laughter came from his crib. He was innocent, untouched by the storm that brewed in his mother's heart. Daniel smiled at the baby. "He's growing so fast," he said warmly. "Soon he'll be walking all over the house." Martha forced a nod. "Yes, he will." Her voice trembled, but Daniel didn't notice. Before leaving for work, he leaned close to kiss her forehead. "I love you, Martha. You're my peace." The words stabbed her heart. Peace, she thought bitterly. If only you knew. Later that afternoon, Martha sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone, deleting old messages from Linda, her friend in Accra. She didn't notice Daniel's phone vibrating on the couch beside her. He had forgotten it when he rushed back into the bedroom to grab his keys. A message popped up on his screen. "Linda Mensa. Daniel, please call me. There's something you deserve to know about Martha and Jason." Martha froze. Her eyes widened as she saw her worst fear staring at her. She quickly grabbed Daniel's phone, trying to delete the message. But at that exact moment, Daniel walked back into the room. "What are you doing with my phone?" he asked, calm but curious. Martha's lips parted. "Oh, I heard it ring. I was checking if it was urgent." He took the phone gently, glanced at the screen, and his face changed. The name Linda Mensa struck him like lightning. "Linda?" he murmured. "Your old friend from Ghana?" Martha's pulse raced. "Yes, she must have sent something by mistake." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "By mistake?" He scrolled up. The words on the screen felt heavy. "There's something you deserve to know." "Martha," he said slowly, "what does she mean by that?" Martha's hands trembled. "I don't know, Daniel. Maybe it's about work or—" "Work," he cut in sharply. "A woman from Accra who barely knows me sends that message about you and Jason, and you say it's about work?" The air turned thick. Jason's soft cry broke the silence. Martha rushed to carry him, avoiding Daniel's gaze. He stepped closer. "Martha, look at me. Is there something I should know?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. Daniel clenched his jaw and walked out of the house without another word. That evening, in his office, Daniel couldn't focus. Linda's message replayed in his mind. His chest tightened. What could she mean? He scrolled through his contacts, found Linda's number, and called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Daniel," her voice was soft, hesitant. "I was hoping you'd call." "What is going on, Linda?" he demanded. "You sent a message that nearly broke my home." "What truth are you talking about?" There was a long pause. Then Linda sighed deeply. "Daniel, I can't say this over the phone, but please do a DNA test for Jason." Daniel froze. "What?" "You need to know the truth," she whispered, "before it's too late." He hung up, his hand trembling. His world began to tilt. Every laughter, every smile, every night spent rocking Jason to sleep suddenly felt uncertain. That night, he came home quiet. Martha greeted him, her smile shaky. He didn't answer. He walked past her, kissed Jason softly, and whispered to himself, "I'll find out the truth." As Martha watched him walk into the dark hallway, her knees weakened. She knew the web was tearing apart, and soon everything she had built on lies would collapse. The rain poured heavily that night in Lagos. Thunder rolled across the sky, and lightning flashed through the windows of the Adams home. Inside, Daniel sat alone in the living room, eyes fixed on nothing. his mind trapped between love and disbelief. Martha had gone to bed early, pretending to be sick. The air between them had turned cold since Linda's message. No words, just silence, the kind that screams louder than anger. Daniel's phone buzzed again. A new message from Linda. "You don't need to believe me, Daniel. Just find the truth for yourself. It's the only way to heal." He stared at the screen for a long moment, then slowly stood up. His hands trembled as he whispered, "I have to know." He picked up Jason from his crib, the baby half asleep, soft breaths rising and falling. Daniel smiled sadly. "You look just like me. Or do you?" The thought cut him deep. He kissed Jason's forehead, tears filling his eyes. "If you're not mine by blood, you'll still always be my son by heart." The next morning, while Martha was out buying groceries, Daniel made a quiet call to a private laboratory in Ikeja. "I need a discrete DNA test," he said firmly. The man on the other end replied, "Bring a hair sample from both the child and yourself. Results in 48 hours. Confidential. That night, Daniel waited until Martha fell asleep, then carefully cut a few strands of Jason's hair and sealed them in an envelope. He placed the sample next to his own and labeled it simply D and J. His heart felt heavy, like he was betraying his family to save it. 2 days later, Daniel sat in his car outside the laboratory. The results were ready. His palms were sweaty, his breathing uneven. He thought about every laugh, every sleepless night, every moment Jason had held his finger. Finally, he gathered courage and entered. The receptionist handed him a sealed envelope. "Confidential, sir." He walked back to his car, sat still, and opened it with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the lines until they froze on the result. Probability of paternity, 0%. The tested male is not the biological father of the child. Daniel's breath stopped. The world around him went silent. He read it again and again, but the words didn't change. Not the father. He leaned back in the car seat, staring at the rain beating against the windshield. A deep, painful sob escaped his chest. "How could she do this?" he whispered. "After everything." He clenched the paper in his hand, crushed it, and threw it to the floor. But no matter how hard he tried to destroy it, the truth stayed alive, cold and sharp. That night, Daniel didn't go home. He sat by the third mainland bridge, watching the city lights flicker across the lagoon. His thoughts raced. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. He remembered the day Jason was born, how Martha smiled through tears, how she had said, "He's your mirror, Daniel." He laughed bitterly in the darkness. "My mirror, you said." He looked up at the cloudy sky. God, what did I do to deserve this? By midnight, Daniel drove back home. Martha was asleep, Jason by her side. He stood at the door for a long moment, just watching them. He could hear Jason's tiny breathing. For a second, he wanted to pick him up, to hold him again, but pain stopped him. He turned away and whispered, "You both broke me." Martha stirred slightly, half awake, and saw him standing there. "Daniel?" she murmured softly. He didn't answer. He just walked out of the room, his heart colder than the rain outside. The air inside the Adams apartment had changed. The laughter, the warmth, the joy, all gone. Silence had replaced them. Silence so heavy it could crush the soul. Daniel barely spoke these days. He left early, came home late, and when he did, he hardly looked at Martha. He smiled at Jason, but even that smile carried pain. Martha felt the distance. She saw the coldness in Daniel's eyes, the quiet suspicion in his voice. Something inside her screamed that he knew. That night, she sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker outside. Rain tapped gently on the glass. She whispered to herself, "He knows." He found out. Her phone buzzed. A message from Linda again. "You can't keep running from the truth, Martha. Confess before this destroys you." Martha threw the phone against the couch. Tears filled her eyes. Confess? And lose everything? Never. She paced back and forth, breathing hard. Daniel was in the bedroom, pretending to sleep. She could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan, the baby's gentle breathing. If Daniel left her, she would have nothing. No home, no status, no future. And worst of all, everyone would know the shame she had buried for years. Her thoughts grew darker. She sat down slowly, eyes red and swollen. "There's only one way to make it stop," a voice whispered in her mind. "Only one way to end the threat forever." She shook her head violently. "No, I can't." But the thought returned, colder, stronger. If the child is gone, the truth dies with him. Martha pressed her palms against her face. "God forgive me," she whispered, "but I can't let this ruin me." The next morning, Daniel left for work without saying a word. Martha stood by the window, watching his car disappear. Her face was pale. Her eyes looked hollow. She turned toward Jason's crib. The baby laughed, waving his little hands, innocent and full of life. Her tears fell faster. "Why did you come into this world like this?" she said softly. "You didn't ask for this, but you've become my punishment." She sat beside him, holding a small bottle of milk. Her hand shook as she unscrewed the cap. From her pocket, she pulled out a small packet. White powder, poison, she had bought 2 days earlier from a roadside vendor. Her heart pounded. "Just a little," she whispered. "He won't feel a thing." She hesitated. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "No lie lives forever, Martha. The truth always comes." But the fear was stronger than conscience. Her trembling hand poured the powder into the milk and shook the bottle. Jason reached for her, smiling. "Mama," the sound broke her. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She closed her eyes tightly, pressed the bottle to his lips, and whispered, "I'm sorry." Jason drank slowly, his little hands gripping hers. Within minutes, his laughter faded. His eyes closed. Silence filled the room. Martha screamed, not in surprise, but in guilt. She dropped the bottle and fell to her knees beside the crib, shaking his lifeless body. "No, no, no, Jason," she cried. "Wake up, please." But it was too late. The sound of the rain outside grew louder, almost as if the heavens themselves were weeping. An hour later, Daniel's phone rang at work. It was Martha, her voice trembling. "Daniel, come home. Please come home." "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's Jason. He's not breathing." Daniel's heart stopped. He dropped everything and ran out. By the time he arrived, Martha was on the floor, holding Jason tightly, crying uncontrollably. "I don't know what happened," she sobbed. "He just stopped breathing." Daniel fell to his knees beside her, holding the baby, shouting his name, begging for life to return. But Jason's tiny body was cold. The perfect lie was dead, and with it, the last piece of Daniel's heart. The rain had stopped in Lagos, but the storm inside Daniel's heart was only beginning. He stood alone in the small cemetery, staring down at the little white coffin. The name on it read, Jason Daniel Adams, 1 year old. His hands clenched into fists. His voice broke as he whispered, "I couldn't save you, my boy, but I'll make sure she never forgets what she did." Behind him, Martha stood, with dark glasses and a veil covering her face. Tears fell silently down her cheeks, but Daniel didn't look at her. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the cold silence of her sin. Back at home, Martha sat on the bed, clutching Jason's toy, a small, stuffed lion. Her eyes were lifeless. Every sound in the house reminded her of him. His laugh, his cry, his little footsteps. Suddenly, the front door opened. Daniel walked in, face blank. He said nothing. Martha stood, quickly. "Daniel, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." He looked at her with cold, empty eyes. "You killed him because of your lies, Martha. You destroyed our family. And now, I can't sleep, I can't breathe, I can't even pray." He stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you know what it feels like to look at your wife and see a murderer?" Martha fell to her knees, crying uncontrollably. "Please, forgive me." Daniel stared down at her for a long moment, then turned away. Forgiveness died the day he did. The next day, Daniel quit his job and disappeared from Lagos. No one knew where he went. Rumors spread. Some said he left for Ghana. Others said he had gone mad. Martha was left alone, haunted by guilt, tormented by silence. Every knock on the door made her heart jump. Every dream ended in Jason's tiny voice whispering, "Mama, why?" In Accra, Ghana, Daniel started a new life. He worked in a small mechanic shop owned by an old man named Samuel, who treated him like a brother. But even there, peace refused to find him. Every night, Daniel sat by the ocean, watching the dark waves crash against the rocks. The wind carried Jason's laughter, and sometimes he thought he could see the boy's reflection in the water. Samuel noticed his sadness one evening and said, "Son, you can't run from pain. You must face it before it swallows you." Daniel looked at him and replied softly, "I will face it when the time is right." Months later, Martha received a message on her phone. No name, just a short text. "Justice doesn't forget." Her hands trembled as she read it. She looked out the window, her heartbeat racing. She knew who sent it. Daniel was alive, and he was watching. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the house looked like him. Every sound felt like footsteps approaching. She whispered into the darkness, "Daniel, please, don't hurt me." But miles away, Daniel wasn't planning murder. He was planning something worse. Something that would make Martha face her truth in front of the world. He reached out to Linda, the woman who had warned him from the start. Together, they began gathering evidence. Messages, photos, even Martha's secret communications with the man who had fathered Jason. Daniel's voice was cold as he said to Linda, "She killed my son to protect her lies. I'll destroy her lies to honor my son." Linda looked at him, worried. "Daniel, revenge won't bring Jason back." He nodded slowly. "No, but it will bring peace to his memory." By dawn, Daniel stared across the sea from Accra, the sun breaking through the horizon. He whispered, "Lagos, I'm coming home." But what Daniel planned next, no one could have imagined. Months had passed since Daniel left Lagos. The waves of the Atlantic in Accra had seen his pain, his tears, and his silence. But they had also witnessed something darker grow inside him, a calm hunger for justice. One morning, as the sun painted the sky gold, Daniel stood by the shore, his bag at his feet. His reflection in the water was different now, colder, sharper. He whispered to the sea, "It's time." And just like that, he turned his back on Accra and began the long journey home. The bus ride from Ghana to Nigeria felt endless. Through the dusty glass, Daniel watched the world pass. Small villages, children chasing after goats, old women selling plantain by the roadside. But he didn't see them. His mind was fixed on one face, Martha's. Every bump on the road felt like a heartbeat of vengeance. Every mile brought him closer to the woman who had destroyed his life. When the bus finally reached Lagos, night had fallen. The air was thick with humidity, traffic lights flickering like dying candles. Daniel stepped out, clutching his small bag, and breathed deeply. Back to where the nightmare began, he murmured. Martha, meanwhile, was no longer the proud woman she once was. Her beauty had faded. Her spirit was shattered. She lived in constant fear, haunted by every sound, every shadow, every whisper. Neighbors had started talking. Some said she went mad after her baby died. Others said her husband had cursed her before disappearing. She barely slept. When she did, she saw Jason, his tiny hands reaching out, his innocent voice calling, "Mama!" She would wake up screaming every night. That evening, as the rain started to fall again in Lagos, Martha sat on her bed, staring at her phone. It vibrated once. A message notification. From unknown. "Did you miss me?" Her heart froze. Her eyes widened. She dropped the phone and covered her mouth with trembling hands. "No, it can't be," she whispered. The phone rang. Slowly, she picked it up. "Hello?" Silence. Then a voice, deep, calm, and familiar. "Martha," she gasped, her throat tightening. "Daniel?" He didn't answer. She could hear his slow breathing on the other end, then 3 words that made her blood run cold. "You killed him." Click. The call ended. Martha screamed, throwing the phone against the wall. She fell to the floor, shaking. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "He's alive. He knows everything." Across town, Daniel sat in a dark internet cafe. His face was lit only by the blue glow of a computer screen. He scrolled through pictures, Jason's photos, Martha's old messages, the DNA report. Then he opened his social media account and began to upload them one by one. "The world will know the truth," he said, quietly. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire. Blogs, WhatsApp groups, and local news carried the scandal. Lagos woman poisoned her baby to hide infidelity. Martha's name and face were everywhere. By morning, she couldn't step outside without feeling eyes on her. People whispered as she passed. Children pointed. Strangers filmed her on their phones. "Isn't that the woman who killed her baby?" they murmured. Martha ran, tears mixing with the rain, her mind spiraling into panic. As she reached the old alley near their former home, she stopped. Lightning flashed, and out of the shadows, a tall figure stepped forward. Daniel. Her breath caught in her throat. "Daniel, please." He stood still, rain dripping down his face. His eyes were not angry, they were empty. "I told you," he said softly, "you'd live long enough to feel what I feel." She fell to her knees. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to lose you. I made a mistake." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the storm. Martha screamed his name, but the rain drowned her voice. That night, Daniel sat in a small hotel room, watching the news play on TV. Martha's story was everywhere. Her face filled the screen. Broken, disgraced, humiliated. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He whispered to himself, "Jason, your mother will never forget." But deep inside, a new pain began to grow, a question that wouldn't go away. Had he gone too far? The world had turned its back on Martha Adams. Her name had become a curse on every tongue. From the markets to the offices, from WhatsApp groups to late-night gossip shows, everyone knew her story. The woman who poisoned her own baby to hide her lies. Each day was a punishment, each night a nightmare. She could no longer walk freely on the streets. Even when she covered her face with scarves and sunglasses, whispers followed her like shadows. "That's her. The baby killer. May God punish her." The shame cut deeper than any knife. At home, her apartment was falling apart, much like her mind. The curtains hung loose, dust filled the corners, and Jason's toys lay untouched on the floor. Every night, she would light a candle beside his photo and cry until her voice went hoarse. "Jason, my baby, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared." Sometimes she thought she heard his giggle. Other times, she felt his tiny hand brush against her cheek. But when she turned, there was nothing. Only silence, heavy and cruel. Meanwhile, Daniel watched from a distance. He saw the broken woman she had become. He saw her walking through the streets barefoot in the rain, muttering Jason's name, her hair tangled, her eyes empty. He had wanted her to suffer, and she did. But now, something inside him began to shift. One evening, he sat alone in a small Lagos cafe. The radio played softly, but his mind was elsewhere. He remembered the day Jason was born. The laughter, the tears, the hope. He didn't deserve any of this, Daniel whispered to himself. He closed his eyes, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. Days later, Martha collapsed in the street near the market. A crowd gathered, but no one helped. They only stared and murmured. An elderly woman stepped forward, shaking her head. "She's paying for her sins. Let her lie there." But Daniel, who had been following from afar, rushed through the crowd. He lifted Martha into his arms. The people gasped. "That's her husband. Why is he helping her?" Ignoring them, Daniel carried Martha into his car. Her body was weak, her lips dry. She opened her eyes slowly, barely whispering, "Why? Why are you here?" Daniel's voice was low, trembling. "Because even sinners deserve mercy." He took her to a small hospital on the outskirts of Lagos. The doctor said she was suffering from severe trauma, malnutrition, and exhaustion. She needed rest. But more than that, she needed peace. That night, Daniel sat by her bedside, watching her sleep. Her face was pale, but calm for the first time in months. He whispered softly, "You destroyed everything, Martha. But I destroyed myself, trying to destroy you." When she woke the next morning, Daniel was still there. She turned away, tears in her eyes. "I don't deserve your kindness," she said weakly. He nodded. "You're right. You don't. But maybe I need to forgive you so I can breathe again." Martha looked at him, confused. "Forgive me?" Daniel sighed deeply. "Not because you deserve it, but because I can't keep living in hate." For the first time, she broke into uncontrollable sobs. Daniel didn't move. He just sat there, silent, letting her cry. In the days that followed, Daniel arranged for Martha to be transferred to a quiet recovery center outside the city, away from cameras, gossip, and judgment. He visited once before leaving. She was sitting by a window, staring at the sky. He said softly, "You'll never see Jason again, but maybe you can learn to live like someone who once had love." She nodded, her voice barely audible. "And you? What will you do now?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I'll try to forgive myself too." He turned and walked away, his steps slow but sure. For the first time since Jason's death, the air felt lighter around him. That night, Martha wrote a letter to Daniel. "I can never undo what I did, but your mercy saved what was left of my soul. If Jason can see us, I hope he smiles again." She folded the paper and placed it beside Jason's photo. Outside, the rain fell softly, not as punishment this time, but as cleansing. Peace was supposed to follow forgiveness, but for Daniel, it didn't. Weeks after leaving Martha at the recovery center, he still woke up every night drenched in sweat, hearing Jason's voice echo in his dreams. The same tiny whisper, "Daddy, don't be angry anymore." He would sit on the edge of his bed, staring into the darkness, wondering if mercy had really set him free, or just chained him differently. Daniel had moved to Ibadan to start over. The city was quieter, less noise, less pain. He opened a small mechanic workshop near Bodija Market and tried to live simply. But every time a mother passed by, carrying her baby, he froze. The laughter of children on the street pierced his heart like glass. He began avoiding people. He no longer smiled. He barely ate. His co-worker Samuel, who had once helped him in Accra, visited one afternoon. "You look tired, Daniel," Samuel said softly. "I forgave her," Daniel replied, eyes distant. "Then why do you still look like a man at war?" Daniel sighed. "Because forgiveness doesn't erase the memory." Meanwhile, back at the recovery center, Martha had started writing in a small notebook every day. She wrote letters, not to Daniel, not even to herself, but to Jason. "My baby," one page read, "your father saved my life, though I took yours. I will carry that pain until my last breath. But maybe one day I'll find a way to make peace with heaven." The nurses said she spoke less and prayed more. They saw her smile faintly some mornings when the sunlight touched her window. But deep down, guilt still lived in her eyes, like a shadow that refused to leave. A few months later, a letter arrived at Daniel's shop. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. He opened it slowly. "Daniel, you saved me from death. You taught me that mercy is stronger than punishment. I know I can never earn your forgiveness fully, but I want to make amends. There's a small orphanage near Lagos where I volunteer now. Helping those children reminds me that love still exists. I pray you find peace too." Martha Daniel read the letter 3 times. He didn't know whether to cry or smile. That night, he sat outside his workshop under the stars. The city lights twinkled in the distance. He whispered, "Maybe this is what Jason would have wanted." The next weekend, Daniel drove to Lagos. He didn't tell Martha he was coming. He simply wanted to see for himself. When he reached the orphanage, he saw her through the gate, surrounded by little children, laughing as they played with paper toys. Her face was different now, softer, lighter. For a moment, Daniel just watched. The sight broke him. All his anger, all his hate, began to melt away. He turned to leave quietly, but one of the children saw him and shouted, "Uncle, come and play." Martha turned. Their eyes met for the first time in months. Silence filled the space between them. Tears welled up in Martha's eyes. She whispered, "Daniel." He smiled faintly. "You're doing good work," he said. She nodded, voice trembling, trying to make things right. Daniel looked at the laughing children and said softly, "Jason would have loved this place." Her lips quivered. "He would." They stood in silence for a moment, the noise of playing children around them like background music to their broken hearts. Then Daniel said, "You don't owe me any more, Martha. Just live right. That's all I ask." Martha nodded slowly. "And you, forgive yourself." He gave a small smile and turned to go. As he walked away, Martha whispered under her breath, "Thank you." Later that night, Daniel visited Jason's grave for the first time in a year. He brought a small white flower and placed it gently on the soil. "I'm sorry I let anger rule me," he whispered. "Your mother and I are learning to breathe again. Maybe that's what peace looks like." The wind blew softly across the cemetery, rustling the leaves. For the first time, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not joy, not sadness, but release. The next morning, Martha woke up early at the orphanage. As she walked through the courtyard, she found something on the bench near the gate, a folded note and a single white flower. She opened it. It read, "We both lost Jason, but maybe we can honor him by saving others. Daniel." She smiled through her tears. Months had passed since Daniel returned to Lagos. The city looked the same. The traffic, the loud horns, the busy faces, but something in him had changed. He had stopped shouting. He had stopped fighting. Instead, he listened. Daniel had rented a small room near Surulere and began volunteering at a local orphanage. The same place where Martha spent her days in Accra, he now spent his in Lagos. He fixed broken beds, repaired leaking pipes, and taught the boys how to use tools. The children didn't know his story, but they loved him anyway. They called him Uncle Dan. Every time a child laughed, Daniel felt Jason's spirit near him. He had stopped asking why and started thanking God that he still had life to make something right. One evening, Sister Grace, the woman who ran the orphanage, handed him a letter. "It's from Ghana," she said softly. Daniel froze for a moment. His hands trembled as he opened it. The letter was from Martha. Her handwriting was softer now, not shaky like before. "Daniel, I will never forget what I did, but I have stopped punishing myself. I see Jason's smile in every child's face. I pray for you every night. If you ever find peace, please forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours." Martha Daniel folded the letter slowly and placed it on his heart. For the first time, tears came, not angry tears, but quiet ones. He whispered, "I forgive you, Martha. I forgive you." That night, Daniel walked to the lagoon bridge. The wind was cool, and the city lights danced on the water. He pulled out Jason's baby shoe, the only thing he kept from that painful night. He kissed it, whispered a prayer, and dropped it gently into the water. "Rest now, my boy," he said. The baby shoe floated for a moment before sinking, disappearing into the deep. As it did, Daniel felt something inside him break free, the heavy weight he had carried for so long. The next morning, he woke up to laughter outside his window. The orphanage children were playing football, their voices echoing joy. Daniel smiled for the first time in a long while. It was a quiet Sunday morning in Lagos. The orphanage courtyard was filled with the laughter of children chasing a torn football. Daniel stood by the window of his small workshop, watching them with a gentle smile. Then he heard a voice he hadn't heard in almost 2 years. Soft, familiar, trembling. Daniel. He froze. The wrench in his hand dropped. Slowly, he turned. And there she was. Martha. She looked thinner, older, and her eyes carried stories that words could never explain. Behind her, a little boy of about 4 years clutched her hand shyly. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Martha?" he whispered, not believing his eyes. She nodded. "I came because I needed to see you. And this," she looked down at the boy, "this is David, the child I adopted in Accra." The boy hid behind her leg, peeking at Daniel with curious eyes. For a long moment, silence filled the air. Not the angry silence of the past, but one heavy with peace and memory. Daniel swallowed hard. "You came all the way from Ghana?" "Yes," she said softly. "I wanted to thank you for forgiving me. I didn't deserve it, but it gave me strength to live again." Daniel turned away, blinking back tears. Forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs peace. Martha stepped closer, her voice breaking. "I live every day trying to make Jason proud. I know he's gone, but maybe God gave us both a second chance." She looked at the children running around and smiled through her tears. "I see him in their laughter." Daniel nodded. "I see him too." They stood side by side, watching the orphans play. Two broken souls, mended by grace. Later that afternoon, Martha helped Sister Grace serve food to the children. Daniel watched quietly, his heart lighter than it had been in years. When David handed him a plate of rice and beans, Daniel knelt beside him. "Thank you, son," he said softly. The boy smiled. "Mama says you fix everything." Daniel smiled back, eyes shining. "Not everything, but I try." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turned orange and gold. Martha and Daniel sat outside, sharing quiet stories about faith, forgiveness, and the children they both now loved. Before she left that night, Martha handed him a small cross-shaped pendant. "It belonged to Jason," she whispered. "I kept it all this while. But I think it belongs to you now." Daniel held it tightly, feeling the weight of memory and mercy in his hand. He looked at her and said, "Maybe pain was God's way of teaching us how to love better." Martha smiled, her eyes glistening. "And forgiveness, His way of teaching us how to live again." Months passed after Martha's visit. The orphanage in Lagos had grown into something beautiful. Children laughed freely. The walls were painted bright yellow. A sign at the gate read, "Jason's Home of Hope." Daniel and Sister Grace ran the orphanage with love and discipline. Every evening, Daniel would tell the children short stories about forgiveness, about starting again, about courage. He didn't talk much about his past, but somehow every story carried a piece of it. Then one day, a child arrived who changed everything. He was a thin, quiet boy named Samuel, about 6 years old. He didn't smile, he didn't speak much, he just stared, especially at Daniel. The first night, when the other children slept, Samuel sat awake, staring out the window. Daniel found him there. "Why aren't you asleep, son?" he asked softly. The boy looked up and said something that froze Daniel's heart. "I know you. You're the man who lost his baby." Daniel's breath caught. "What did you say?" "My mother told me your story before she died," Samuel said quietly. "She said you forgave someone who hurt you. She said I should find you one day." Daniel knelt beside him, shaken. "Who was your mother?" The boy hesitated. Then he whispered, Her name was Patience. She worked at a clinic in Accra. Daniel's eyes widened. Patience, the nurse who had helped Martha when she almost took her own life, the one who convinced her to choose life, to live. Tears filled his eyes. "You're Patience's son?" Samuel nodded slowly. She said, "If I ever met you, I should remind you, Jason still lives, in every child you help." Daniel hugged the boy tightly, tears falling freely. "You've done that already, son." The next morning, Daniel gathered all the children and told them Jason's story for the first time. He spoke of loss, betrayal, forgiveness, and faith. The children listened in silence, wide-eyed, as he said, "Jason's life was short, but his echo still lives here. In you, this home is his voice." That evening, Martha called from Accra. When Daniel told her about Samuel, she broke down crying. "That's not a coincidence, Daniel," she said softly. "It's God's way of showing us that Jason's memory will never fade. It's his mercy echoing back to us." It had been 2 weeks since Daniel found Samuel, the boy who carried Jason's memory in his heart. The doctors said the child's fever had passed, but his spirit was still weak. Every day, Daniel sat beside his bed, praying softly and telling stories about angels who live in rivers. On a bright morning, the nurse brought a small letter. "It's for you," she said with a smile. Daniel opened it slowly. The handwriting was soft, shaky, Martha's handwriting. "Daniel, I heard about the boy. I don't know how God planned this, but my heart tells me to come home. I want to see you. I want to meet him. Maybe this is how Jason speaks to us now." Daniel read the letter again and again, tears clouding his eyes. He looked at Samuel, who was smiling weakly, and whispered, "Would you like to meet someone very special?" Samuel nodded. Days later, the orphanage courtyard was filled with sunlight and the laughter of children. Daniel stood by the gate as a taxi stopped outside. Martha stepped out, dressed in a simple cream gown, her eyes full of sorrow and hope. She looked thinner, older, but there was peace in her face. They stood for a long moment, saying nothing. The wind carried the sound of the river nearby, the same one Daniel used to visit when he prayed for strength. Then Martha spoke first. "Daniel, I never thought God would bring me back here." Daniel sighed deeply. Maybe we both needed to find something beyond our pain. Martha's eyes fell on Samuel, who was standing shyly behind Daniel. "Is this him?" she whispered. Daniel nodded. "His name is Samuel. But sometimes, when he laughs, I see Jason's face." Martha's lips trembled. She knelt and opened her arms. "Come here, my child." Samuel looked at Daniel. He nodded gently, and the boy ran into Martha's arms. She held him tightly, her tears falling freely on his hair. "I'm sorry," she whispered to both of them. "I'm sorry for everything." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Forgiveness isn't earned, Martha. It's given." That evening, the three of them walked to the riverbank, the same river where Daniel once threw Jason's toy into the water, begging for peace. The sunset painted the sky gold and purple, and the sound of rushing water filled the air. Daniel took out a small wooden box. Inside was Jason's old baby shoe, the only thing he had kept. He handed it to Martha. "Let's give him peace together." Martha kissed the tiny shoe, tears blurring her vision. Then she placed it on the river's surface, and they watched it float away. Slow, peaceful, shining under the light. Samuel looked up at Daniel and asked, "Will Jason come back now?" Daniel smiled faintly. He already did, my boy. In you, they stood side by side, watching the wooden shoe disappear beyond the bend of the river. A light breeze brushed their faces, warm, calm, almost like Jason's little hand touching them again. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear from your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit the subscriber button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.